What is going on, YouTube universe? My name is Trent and welcome to the Hip and Shoulder, the channel where we discuss everything Australian rules football. And today, ladies and gentlemen, we're diving into another edition of the Round Recap podcast. If you are new around here, welcome. If you are returning, welcome back. Whatever the case may be, it is time for us to sit back, relax and unpack another action-packed round of AFL football. And round 21 did not fail to disappoint. It was a round that featured a fair few matchups that are going to start shaping the overall formation of the top 8 and even the top 4. And I can't remember a season in recent history anyway, where with 4 rounds to go, the top 8 and top 4 is still very much up for grabs. And after the results of this particular round, number 1 spot, which was almost 3 games clear for most of the season, is now up for grabs as well. Did not think that was ever going to be the case with how red hot Sydney were running only a month or two ago. But this particular round kicked off at Marvel Stadium. Western Bulldogs taking on Melbourne. 2 teams very much still in the hunt for that top 8 finish. However, both teams very much playing different brands of football, and momentum is swinging completely different ways. We've got the Bulldogs who, despite all the conjecture and discussion around Luke Beveridge as a coach and him needing to go, which, hey, I still very firmly believe Luke Beveridge needs to go. I still think there's shit going on behind closed doors, and I think there's some very disgruntled players. There's still going to be player movement going down, but the Bulldogs have managed to turn their season around quite convincingly and currently run into the final 3 games of the season as one of the most informed teams of the comp. Melbourne, on the other hand, they've been finding ways to win, but they have still hit the wayside quite severely since Christian Petrarca went down with that injury. And we know Clayton Oliver and the discussion around his preseason antics and his fitness and potential drug use. I'm going to say potential because some of us believe so, some of us don't, and I'm not here to throw any allegations or talk any facts, but he's definitely a shadow of his former self. Max Gawn, still one of the premier ruck, if not the premier ruckman of the competition, but he has had a down year compared to what he has put out recently. I personally think he isn't All-Australian ruckman this year. Big call, I know, but 2 teams on different sides of the spectrum fighting for the exact same thing, and that is to keep their finals chances alive and to keep the beat on the pulse, really, for their season to continue. And it was unfortunate for Melbourne that the Bulldogs, just running on the red hot form that they are, absolutely took them to town. And you probably would have thought at quarter time it was going to be game over. 4 goals 7 playing 1 goal 1. Very inaccurate by the Bulldogs, but that's been the tail of the tape for the Bulldogs this season. They have just been kicking themselves out of games, and this is a game that they could have very well kicked themselves out of, considering out of the 35 shots they had on goal for that game that registered a type of score, 20 of those 35 were behinds. But at halftime, 6-13 playing 5 goals 1, still in the hunt, only a couple of goals down. Melbourne can dig deep and rally something here, but it just wasn't meant to be. For the rest of the game, Melbourne went on to kick 4 goals 4. The Bulldogs went on to amass 11 goals 7 for the rest of the game. So very accurate in the second term. As far as anything in the way of injuries go, the Bulldogs did lose Liberatore at 3/4 time, being subbed out with a right ankle injury, so it'd be interesting to see whether that was precautionary given how far in front they were. Put him on wool a little bit, keep him fresh. Caleb Daniel was the sub for the Bulldogs in that game, and I feel Caleb Daniel will be one of those players potentially seeking a move at the end of the year. Adelaide, Port Adelaide, teams like that I think might be in the hunt. And for Melbourne, Stephen May was subbed out at halftime with a rib injury, with Daniel Turner replacing him. So it'd be interesting to watch whether Stephen May's rib injury is going to be was that just a 1 game kind of thing, sub him out and hope he's better for the next week, because we know he's had some damage done to his ribs consistently over his career. So interesting watch for Melbourne, because Stephen May is one of those critical players where if they lose him, could spell doom for them if this loss hasn't already done so. We'll look at the ladder come the end of the video, and we'll see just how deep this loss will eventually, hit Melbourne, because as it stands right now, the win puts the Bulldogs into the top 8 calculations, and they look primed to strike. A lot of people have them now in premiership conversation, whether it be winning the premiership or whether it be making the grand final. This is a team that I don't think had any mind paid to them in that retrospect, but they're definitely getting mind paid to them now. When trying to look a little bit deeper into the game and individual performances to determine who I thought was best on ground, again, another game where there were so many standouts from both teams, but especially the Bulldogs, given how big of a win it was and how much of an even spread they had. It was hard, I felt, to land on a definitive 3-2-1 outside of who I'm giving the 3 vote, the 2 vote to. And I feel the 3 vote and the 2 vote are going to players who really outdid themselves. But again, it's going to cause discussion points in the comments of this video, and I open you to discuss those conversations with me. Have a chat. Let's talk about it, because I love creating these discussion points, and I love when the people watching at home, you guys, I'm talking to you guys, come out and respond to those questions and pose questions of myself. And that's part of what I want to do with the community we are building here. I want to be able to have a platform for people who love this game as much as I do to come in, have a conversation about it, whether it be, tearing down some of my opinions, whether it be supporting them. It's all about creating some chatter. That's all I want to do. And when it comes to selecting the best on ground, I do so in the Brownlow scheme of a 3-2-1 vote system for what I have called the Hip and Shoulder MVP Award, which essentially, if you follow any other AFL YouTubers that kind of dig into the deep dive of things like this, they tend to do their own MVP awards, whether it be for the teams that they follow individually, like the Hoops Show, they do the MVP award for just Geelong. Other content creators like to do it just in general for, the blanket of the competition, like I am. It's not at all to get any clout or any kind of attention or respect. The players that I'm voting for will probably never see these. It is just more so giving myself a platform to look deeper into games and kind of, impart my take on what I thought, and then again opens up the floor to you guys at home to discuss your takes. So as far as this game went, Bailey Dale is probably the stiff one here to miss out, because he had a pretty big game. 34 disposals at 79% disposal efficiency, 10 contested possessions for 647 metres gained, 8 marks and 4 score involvements. I feel if any player does miss a vote, it's probably him, and he'd probably be, in a position where I'm going to get dragged. But I'm giving the 1 vote to Max Gawn, despite the big loss, because I thought he stood out for Melbourne like dog's balls. 23 disposals at 60% disposal efficiency, 11 contested for 276 metres gained, 44 hitouts, 2 clearances, 9 marks, 1 goal, 4 score involvements, and 2 tackles. You got to keep in mind he's playing against Tim English, who is an incredibly established ruckman. And English only had 28 hitouts for the game. Sam Darcy had 12 hitouts for the game, and that was basically the combination of the two, which didn't amass any more combined than what Max Gawn did on his own. So I thought Max Gawn, basically 2 against 1, played incredibly well. The 2 vote to me goes to a player that we have spoken about a lot this year, and I still feel is very underrated in the fact that he still isn't getting enough attention in my eyes, and that is Adam Treloar. He finished with 30 disposals at 76% disposal efficiency, 10 contested for 366 metres gained, 6 clearances, 4 marks, 2 goals, 11 score involvements, and 4 tackles. However, best on ground, and at this point, could be making a late charge for the Brownlow, I feel, even though he had a bit of a rough start, and a lot of people are probably saying that Adam Treloar is taking votes off him. Marcus Bontempelli, again, putting in a best on ground performance, just as he has over the last numerous amount of weeks. 33 disposals at 69% disposal efficiency, 12 contested for 532 metres gained, 5 clearances, 7 marks, 2 goals won, 16 score involvements, and 5 tackles. He really is a spectacle, this bloke, and it's hard to believe that he has come second in so many Brownlow counts and he hasn't got a Brownlow around his neck yet, because I still feel as an individual well-rounded player, he probably is the best player in the competition. Over at Optus Stadium, West Coast took on the Gold Coast, and when it came to my tipping video, even though I tipped the Gold Coast to win, I said that West Coast at home this year have been a completely different beast to what we have seen in recent years. We all know about the drop-off that they suffered through COVID. We all know about the fallout that followed from that. But this year, they've just gone to a new gear, especially when playing at Optus. And this was a game that West Coast were never out of the hunt for. They were always sticking around, hanging tough. At three-quarter time, they are down. They're only down by a handful of points. They've got to dig deep. And fuck, they did that. They did that and then some. And it was just so emphatic to watch as a neutral supporter, especially their ball control in the dying moments of the game. Incredibly well played. And that kind of moniker of caretaker coaches and stuff kind of standing tall and kind of delivering more than their predecessor, you know, it kind of coming through, because I thought it was a good win for the caretaker coach for West Coast. Whether or not it gives him some moral stance moving forward to take over as coach, I don't know, but West Coast were far more impressive in this game, I felt, than what the Gold Coast were, which is saying something. And this is a team that sent Mac Andrew, who has been an absolute revelation for the Gold Coast this year, as a backman, up forward and in the ruck, and he kicks 3 goals, and he did incredibly well. But I mean, throwing players out of position like that this late in the season, when your season is still very much in the balance, I don't know whether that's the time to be doing it, Hardwick. I don't. Injuries, there were a couple. Gold Coast had Max King go down with a head knock. I don't know how late in the game that was, because Malcolm Rosas was the starting sub for the Gold Coast, and he was subbed on for Joel Jeffrey in the final quarter. So that head knock must have come late. It must have been something I had missed. As for the West Coast, we had Oscar Allen go down with a finger injury, and Luke Edwards had a head knock. It was Harry Edwards, sorry, not Luke Edwards. Clay Hall was subbed in for Harry Edwards in the second quarter, and the finger injury for Oscar Allen is just superficial. It's nothing too serious to be looking at. A big turnout for this game, just under 39,000, which is absolutely spectacular. But again, West Coast just finding a way to defy the odds, and I feel, without being too harsh to West Coast supporters and West Coast as you know, a fraternity, they have outperformed a lot of expectations this year, I feel. I don't think many would have had them winning as many games as they had this year. It's really starting to show that they're reaping the benefit of their reward with sticking tough with the young kids, even though these young kids were probably exposed to the game a little bit earlier than they should have. And I did say over those years, back when I was doing tipping videos over on my gaming channel, that these kids that are getting exposed to the game earlier than they should, it's going to have them in great stead moving forward, because they've got that extra exposure. They've been brought into the game at such a young age that they're able to develop their craft around that kind of exposure. I still feel West Coast may have a drop-off yet coming when it comes to losing Tim Kelly, Elliot Yeo, Jamie Cripps, Liam Duggan, Jack Darling, Jeremy McGovern, all those older players. Once they drop off, are they going to be too big of a pair of shoes to fill? Deal with that when the time comes, I suppose. Best on ground for this game, pretty stock standard. I think the top 3 for this game probably will be in calculations for Brownlow votes. The first of which I've gone with Noah Anderson, who started this season like a house on fire, has dropped off a bit, but in recent weeks has started to recollect that form. He had 30 disposals at 70% disposal efficiency, 10 contested for 359 metres gained, 6 clearances, 5 marks, 1 goal, 5 score involvements. Didn't lay a tackle, which is actually quite surprising because Noah Anderson loves to get in and around the contest, especially when you look at the numbers that some of his teammates were putting up. It's really hard to see why he was winning plenty of the ball, but he didn't have much impact with tackles. But with that being said, Will Powell loves a tackle. He only had 2 for the game. Sam Flanders loves a tackle. He only had 1 for the game. Jared Witts, as the ruckman, he had 4. So, Lockie Weller had 5. Fiorini had 3. So, some players that are kind of out of context, not used for their tackling pressure. Noah Anderson dropping off that defensive kind of mindset. I don't know. I really don't know what has kind of dropped off. He'll either have a really good defensive game or a really good offensive game, but he hasn't had a well-rounded game for a while, I feel. The 2 votes, despite the win, is going to Tim Kelly. 31 disposals at 74% disposal efficiency, 14 contested for 299 metres gained, 8 clearances, 3 marks, 4 score involvements, and 1 tackle. However, the best on ground for me, again, speaking of a player who started like a house on fire and dropped off, was Matt Rowell. And this is easily the best game he has played in well over a month and a half, 2 months of football. 30 disposals, he only ran at 56% disposal efficiency, so needs to clean up his ball use. But he had 21 of those 30 as contested ball, 484 metres gained, 12 clearances, 1 mark, 6 score involvements, and 9 tackles on the day. Absolutely huge performance, just needs to clean up his ball use. Might need to dig into the Optus Stadium grass a little bit more and have a bit of a munch before the game starts just to get an air about the game, maybe get himself grounded a bit more. Saturday afternoon, Marvel Stadium, North Melbourne hosting Richmond. This was the first time I personally was able to get to a live game in almost a year and a half, 2 years of football. And it was very special to myself because it was the first time I took both of my kids to a game of football and we went out for like a family football experience. My son has been to the MCG, has never been to Marvel. My daughter, never been to a football game before. So I thought, why not go out? One of my best mates is a North Melbourne supporter. We'll make a day of it. And I really gave us a red hot chance in this game, but the continuation of the Richmond fade out seems to be the story of our season. We're in the hunt up until 3/4 time, and then we just drop off the edge of a cliff. And it was so upsetting to see this drop off happen, knowing that now anyway, that was the last time we were ever going to see Dustin Martin play live. And Dustin Martin has forever been one of my favourite Tigers. He is my son's favourite player, so the news of Dustin Martin retiring effective immediately hit my family pretty hard. My son's still very upset about it, but I try to point out the silver lining of the fact that he can hang his hat high knowing he got to see Dusty play his last game, albeit kind of in his twilight, in the shadow of his best self. But just upsetting again to see a winnable game just go, and you can't really expect much of a young team in the way of kids that are still being exposed to the game. They're going to run out of legs, the tank's going to run empty rather quickly. But watching this game live really gave me a really good perspective of the lack of effort from some of the Richmond senior players behind the contest. And as much as I love him, Dustin Martin did fall into that category for me. I did say at the end of the game, there was probably 10 players I could throw a blanket over to say they should either delist or trade at the end of the year if we're going to take this rebuild seriously. And I can tell you, Shea Bolton, Dustin Martin, Jaden Short was even in that conversation. Daniel Rioli was a little bit in that conversation. Liam Baker finished with 2 goals, but was still very much in that conversation as well. Camden McIntosh as a potential delisting at the end of the year. There were a few. Jacob Hopper is even one that I'm floating around as a potential trade out. And I've been having conversations with people on this channel about Jacob Hopper, and I've been telling people not to be so bullish on him. But Jacob Hopper and Tim Taranto play too similar a game of football. And my personal belief is one of them should be playing off a half-forward flank, one of them should be in the midfield, and they should rotate. We can't have 2 of the same player playing in the contest at the exact same time, especially when they're so fucking slow as one another. Taranto and Hopper aren't known for speed. We need an injection of speed in there. I would love to see Adam Uze roll the dice and give Daniel Rioli a crack. I know Maurice Rioli Jr. is free to come back, so maybe he gets in the middle. Maybe throw Marlon Pickett in there for something a little bit fucking different moving forward. I don't know, but something needs to click. As for North Melbourne, Larkey comes out and kicks 5 and takes the absolute piss. Luke Davies-Uniacke puts it best on ground performance, where he'll surely pick up 3 Brownlow votes with 30 plus disposals and 3 goals. He was just a spectacle to watch, and I don't understand how we were letting all of these players get so loose, especially in the second half. Just morale dropped, and I don't know. I don't want to get too much. I don't want to get too much into it. I'll get myself worked up. But as for injuries, Dylan Stephens was subbed out of the game with an ankle injury in the third quarter and replaced by Robert Hansen. And for Richmond, Steely Green was subbed out with an ankle injury as well, replaced by Camden McIntosh. It has since been revealed that Steely Green, as well as Tom Brown, who has done a similar ankle injury, will miss the rest of the season for Richmond. And I believe Griffin Logue has been revealed to now be missing the rest of the season for North Melbourne with an injury of his own. So out of this game, Richmond lose another 3 players for the year, given that Dustin Martin's retirement has been made effective immediately. I'll throw a comment or a question of the day to you guys to discuss in the comment section down below. Where do you rate Dustin Martin's career? Do you have him as one of the best of all time? Do you have any kind of objections to people who believe so? Feel free to let me know, because I still think he is one of the best modern day players to have ever played the game. First ballot Hall of Famer. He'll end up in a Hall of Fame legend. I don't think there will be a player, at least for a very time soon, who will be able to amass the levels that Dusty went to, especially when it came to big games. I think he is ultimately the best big game player we have seen ever play the game. That's just my personal opinion. As for the 3-2-1, this is going to be a bit controversial here, and this was one that I actually discussed with my mate on the way home in the car, and he actually validated my choices. So as a North Melbourne fan, to get these choices validated, I appreciate it. The stiff to miss in this game, and there's probably a few. I mean, Harry Sheasel had 29 for 72% disposal efficiency, 9 contested, 350 metres gained, 6 clearances, 5 marks, 7 score involvements and 3 tackles. Colby McKercher had plenty of it with 31 disposals at 87% disposal efficiency in the back. Another player who I thought played out of his absolute skin was Jackson Archer, 20 disposals at 75%. He had 8 defensive marks for the game. He was pretty huge defensively, for North Melbourne. The one vote I landed on goes to Toby Nankervis. And Toby Nankervis has fallen into a discussion point that I feel, especially for the second half of the year, he's been one of the better ruckmen in the competition. Feel free to argue that with me. But he had 16 disposals, 81% disposal efficiency, 7 contested for only 19 meters gained. I don't know whether that's a correct stat or whether or not it was just sideways handballs, because it says here Dustin Martin only went for 24 meters gained. We might, that's very low, 19 meters gained, but he had 35 hitouts, 2 clearances, 3 marks, 6 score involvements, but laid 11 tackles. Now, you have a look at the man who I'm giving the 2 vote to, and that is Tristan Cherry, who I think should be in conversation for the All-Australian Ruckman this year. 20 disposals at 70%, 9 contested for 154 metres gained, 45 hitouts, 1 clearance, 6 marks, 1 behind, 6 score involvements, and 10 tackles. 21 tackles laid between the 2 ruckmen in this game is absolutely incredible. And where I drew the line for Cherry having a bigger game than Nankervis is I felt that while Nankervis had a better game in relation to hits to advantage, Tristan Cherry was able to get around the ground and outmark opponents and kind of set himself up behind the ball a lot better than Nankervis did. But these two going head-to-head was one of my favourite matchups heading into the game, and it did not disappoint. Best on ground, though, I alluded to it earlier, Luke Davies-Uniacke, some sort of a season he's having and somewhat of a game he played. 33 disposals at 81% disposal efficiency, 14 contested, 407 metres gained, 8 clearances, 6 marks, 3 goals, 9 score involvements, and 3 tackles, taking the PISS and taking home probably 3 Brownlow votes while he's at it. GMHBA Stadium played host to Geelong, taking on Adelaide in a game that I was convinced Geelong were absolutely going to romp at home. And Adelaide came out and made an absolute game of it right up until the final siren. And this is what frustrates me as a neutral supporter. I rated Adelaide so highly coming into this season, so much so that I had them within top 6 calculations. I even floated the idea of a potential top 4 finish. But their consistency this year has been so shaky, and their best has been so far from their worst. But when they come to a game like GMHBA against Geelong and are expected to get absolutely belted, but they hang in tough, it starts to show you that those thought processes of them being contenders is validated. It's very well a conversation people can have. It's just a shame that that conversation kind of drops off too and far between. This game had only one injury of note, and that was Sam de Koning going down for Geelong, which I think is a big down and loss for them. Jack Bowes was subbed on in the third quarter for that replacement. And for Adelaide, it was just an example of a tactical sub, I feel, because there was no injury noted. Dan Curtin was subbed on for Matt Crouch in the last. Watch Dan Curtin. I feel he could be back on the move to either West Coast or Fremantle at the end of the year. Adelaide have fumbled Dan Curtin so much. He was so highly rated, so much so that he was in calculations of being like that number 2, number 3 pick in the draft. He got picked up by Adelaide and has been underutilized severely. I feel he needs a fresh start, and he's going to seek it as soon as he can. I was very impressed by Adelaide's fight, but I think I was more so impressed by the fact that Jeremy Cameron just comes out and keeps doing what he does, probably single-handedly winning this game off of his own boot. He, when flying, is so incredible to watch, and he definitely is one of the best key forwards in the comp. And I feel he should be in more conversation given his workload and his ability to get up the ground and win contest and swing back. Huge game. There were huge games by a lot of people, some of which, again, are going to miss out on votes. This is why turning it to you guys at home and giving you guys the opportunity to counteract who I'm voting for is great to listen to, because I love getting your feedback. For this game, there were a few stiff to miss. I mean, Rory Laird had a game-high 29 disposals, 82% disposal efficiency, 8 marks, 4 score involvements, 5 tackles, doesn't get a vote. Matt Crouch had 26 at 84%, 4 clearances, 4 marks, 4 score involvements, 4 tackles, doesn't get a vote. Dangerfield had 21 disposals for 9 clearances, 7 score involvements, and 6 tackles, doesn't get a vote. Tyson Stengel plays in this game after all that chatter about him being found at a fucking nightclub passed out and unresponsive and needed to be rushed to hospital. I have opinions about that. I still feel that story was swept under the rug quite quickly. Had that have been a player like Dustin Martin that was found at a nightclub passed out, would have made headlines all fucking week. I could guarantee you that. So the integrity of the game continues to be wavy and continues to show that there is a little bit of favoritism going on underneath the table. The one vote for this game, and proving if you do not shut him down, he is a match winner for Geelong. Shut him out of the game and he can very well turn the tide of whether Geelong win or lose a game, and that is Tom Stewart. 28 disposals at 75% disposal efficiency, 10 contested for 522 metres gained, 5 clearances, 5 marks, 2 score involvements, and 5 tackles. The 2 vote, I'm throwing at Jordan Dawson. 27 disposals at 77% disposal efficiency, 9 contested for 21 metres gained. It's 21 effective disposals, not metres gained. I apologise. For 339 metres gained, 4 clearances, 6 marks, 5 score involvements, and 5 tackles. But best on ground for me was Jeremy Cameron. Some sort of a game. He was so influential. 17 disposals at 70% disposal efficiency, 4 contested, 309 metres gained, 8 marks, 6 goals won, 9 score involvements, and 3 tackles on the day. Collingwood versus Carlton at the MCG on Saturday night. Scott Pendlebury's 400th game, a classic rivalry. This game had so much on the line and did not fail to disappoint. A game that came down to a kick after the siren, mind you. Mitch McGovern with the chance to upset Scott Pendlebury's celebration and failed to do so and broke the hearts of many Carlton supporters, but collectively had the rest of Australia rising to their fucking feet, I can tell you that. This game, however, on a sour note, does see Jordan De Goey miss the rest of the season. So if Collingwood are to make the finals, they're going to have to do it without Dustin Martin. He went down with a hamstring and was replaced by Pat Lipinski in the third quarter. For Carlton, Adam Cerra did a hamstring, Charlie Curnow had an ankle concern, and Cottrell did a shoulder, with Matt Kennedy replacing Adam Cerra in the second quarter after doing that hamstring injury. I don't think there's anything to worry about with Curnow. I think he was more so, I don't know, nursing a hurt vagina, perhaps, after being towed up by Billy Frampton. I give Billy Frampton so much shit, but he did some sort of a job on Charlie Curnow. And hey, Charlie Curnow goes goalless in a game where he doesn't get a free kick inside forward 50. You know what I'm saying? This game, though, was one of those games where I always say, if you leave the door open for certain clubs, they're going to come back and haunt you. And Collingwood were very much in control of this game. At three-quarter time, 11 goals 9, played 6 goals 14. Very much well and truly alive. Few goals in hand, should have really just put the foot down and ran away with the game. Flirted with disaster, only managed to kick 1 goal 3 for that quarter, with Carlton storming home to kick 5 goals 1. The one question I suppose that is left begging is whether or not this outcome should be a reflection of Collingwood's inability to defend, which has been a glaring problem for Collingwood throughout the 2024 season, or should we be directing our attention more so to the fast finish from Carlton and really still consider them to be a threat, even though they're in a position right now to potentially miss the top 8 completely, which is a huge prospect given they've been within that top 4 bracket for a vast majority of the season. I don't know. It really was a game where Collingwood should have ran away with it by a larger margin, but they just took their foot off the gas and allowed Carlton back into a game that they should have been shut out of by three-quarter time. And again, it just comes down to that defensive structure for Collingwood not being what it used to be last year, and I still feel Nathan Murphy has left big gaps in that defensive structure, whereas Carlton found themselves in a precarious position where they were behind all game, but they dug deep enough to push it to the limit. And had they have just turned it up when the game was truly in the balance early, it could have been a different outcome. So I don't know where we should be sitting within this boat, whether we should be leaning more so towards a reflection of Collingwood or a reflection of Carlton. When looking at individual performances in this game, there are a couple that are going to be stiff to miss always, especially if when determining who is best on ground through the systems I've been doing throughout this podcast, only selecting 3 players when there's easily 5, 6, maybe even 7 players that should be in the conversation. It's incredibly hard to really narrow it down to a definitive 3 that everybody is going to be happy with. And that's why this voting system that I've been doing is so objective in my own views, and that is why, yet again, I've iterated this a few times throughout this podcast today, that it opens up chance for discussion, possibility for a chat. So seriously, I can't state it enough. When it comes to me doing this stuff, let me know how you feel about it, because this game in particular was so hard, and even at the point of this recording, I've been flipping the votes around and trying to argue cases for the people that are going to miss over those that I have selected. I have definitely, before sitting down and recording, I go through every game and I work out my 3-2-1, and I have shifted my 3-2-1 for this game twice already since the beginning of this recording. even sitting here now, I'm not sold on the 3 that I've got. But there are a couple of players that are incredibly stiff. Most notably, it is going to be Nick Newman from Carlton. 34 disposals at 91% disposal efficiency, 7 contested, 503 metres gained, 3 clearances, 12 marks, 4 score involvements and 5 tackles. Huge game. Had huge influence. Sam Walsh, 30 disposals, only ran at 66%, only had 7 contested possessions and only had the 1 clearance for the game, but he had 10 marks, had 6 score involvements and laid 6 tackles himself. Stiff to miss yet again, and probably for Collingwood the biggest would be the Mr. 400 himself, Scott Pendlebury. 27 disposals at 70%, 14 contested, 9 clearances, 1 mark, 5 score involvements and 6 tackles. When you look at those numbers, I hope the 3 that I've landed on are justified. The one that I'm giving the 1 vote to, who originally was sitting in the 2 vote slot, is Nick Dacos. 28 disposals at 53%. He has ran at an incredibly low efficiency, but let's face it, that has been the tale of Nick Dacos' season, really. He hasn't been all that efficient every single week, but he still managed to have 15 contested of those 28. He had 471 metres gained, 7 clearances, 1 goal, 6 score involvements and 6 tackles. I thought when the game was on the line and needed to be won, Nick Dacos dug deep, and his influence for Collingwood was probably second to none, really, I feel, and that is why I've landed him on the 1. Originally, he was in the 2 slot, but having a look at this particular player's performance, I couldn't look past him for 2, and that is George Hewitt. 32 disposals at 75% disposal efficiency, 20 contested, 354 metres gained, 12 clearances, 5 marks, 11 score involvements and 3 tackles. Huge performance from him. But the best on ground is a man that I've been very bullish of this year, and again, I've said it over the last few podcasts and I'll say it again, he should have probably landed more votes off me early, but he didn't. Patrick Cripps could very well be looking at his second Brownlow with another best on ground performance. 30 disposals at 63% disposal efficiency, 15 contested, 556 metres gained, 7 clearances, 4 marks, 1 goal, 2, 9 score involvements and 4 tackles. He tends to be that one that sometimes gets lost in the shuffle, especially when I've just identified so many Carlton players can stand up tall in a situation, and some players are going to be overlooked. I feel, though, with Patrick Cripps, I don't know whether it was a little bit of bias towards him from myself. I do feel that he was probably overshadowed a little bit in the beginning of the season, but he is having a powerful, probably second third of the year. And it's undeniable that he's going to be at the top of the Brownlow tally by the end of the season, and he's going to give it a red hot shake, even though I still feel in the pit of my stomach this year is shaping up to be a draw. There's going to be a tie for the Brownlow this year. I don't know what it is about it, but I just feel it deep down that very well could be and will be the case. This particular game that we're about to talk about next, though, had the competition in deep discussion, and I don't know where the drop-off has come from Sydney over recent weeks, but they got absolutely demoralised by Port Adelaide. Now, I tipped Port Adelaide knowing that out of the last 5 times these two teams have played, Port Adelaide have won, and out of the last 5, 3 of those games have been played at Adelaide Oval. So I had a feeling they were going to be sweet and tucked in the pocket here, but I didn't think Port Adelaide would run away with 112 points in the way of their victory. That's huge, given that this is a club in Sydney that, apart from that blip on the radar early against Richmond, were such a dominant team that we were talking about when their next loss would come. And now we've found ourselves in a precarious position where we've been starting to point out, where is their next win going to come from? And we've gone from very close losses. I mean, collectively this year, prior to the Bulldogs loss, I think they had lost all of their games for the season by no more than 9 points collectively. The Bulldogs come out and then do a number on them at the SCG, and then they come to Port Adelaide and get absolutely fucking smacked. I don't know what is going on. The drop-off is real, and I dare say they aren't premiership favourites anymore. I personally have a different premiership favourite in mind, and we will get to that discussion point when the time comes. But I don't understand where the drop-off is, because it's not like they're missing any talent. They've still got their full team on the field that they have been fielding for the whole season. So why? Where? I'm just left really gobsmacked. I still am trying to find words on how this went down. And then for Port Adelaide, they have shown this year so much inconsistency with their game that it was a blindside that they won by this much. I mean, I expected them to win, but not by this much. But that being said, they're due to play at the MCG this coming weekend, and this could very well be a game where they drop, and it's a game they shouldn't. But that's the position we find Port Adelaide playing themselves into. At their best, easily one of the best in the competition, but we see their worst far more than their best this year, I feel, especially when they're running this red hot. No injuries to report out of this game. As for the substitutions, Quinton Narkle was replaced by... No injuries to report out of this game. The substitutions, if anything, were just tactical. Luke Parker subbed on in the second quarter for Corey Warner, and Quinton Narkle replacing Darcy Byrne-Jones in the third. 37,000 at Adelaide Oval is a great outcome for this game. I would dare say that was probably more Port Adelaide aligned, I would think. And it was a good tale to tell too, because Alira Leah coming from Sydney to Port Adelaide, celebrating his 150th game of football against his old club. It was a script that you probably couldn't write, especially with the outcome, the way it swung. I'm still very much lost for words with how this game played out. I don't understand. They made the Swans look like ugly ducklings. It was so fucking terrible, and it makes you wonder whether or not now Sydney are going to be good enough to hold on for the rest of the year on top of the ladder, or whether they're going to cough that up after really holding down that marker for so long. And it was such a well-rounded performance from a forward line out of Port Adelaide that I've been very bullish of all year. I mean, Willie Rioli kicks 4, Mitch Georgiades kicked 4, Charlie Dixon kicked 3, Dan Houston off of a halfback flank kicked 2, Francis Evans stands up and kicks 2, and then there's just a slew of players that all contributed with 1 goal apiece. It was as comprehensive a performance that you will see from Port Adelaide all year, I feel. I don't think they'll replicate what they did. And here's a fun stat for you. It is the first time in the last century where a top seeded team like Sydney has been defeated this late in the year by more than 100 points. That is insane. That is insane. Port Adelaide making the history books out of a year that has been a real roller coaster for them. Just like the Collingwood-Carlton game, I don't know where this game falls. Should we be talking about Port Adelaide being a serious contender now, given the margin they won by and how complete a performance it was? Or is this more so a reflection of Sydney falling off of the mantle somewhat over recent weeks and really, underperforming to the expectation and the standard that they have set for themselves this year? I don't know. I really do feel Port Adelaide should be in the conversation for contender more than pretender now, with Sydney being a lock for contender now starting to sway to the pretenders a little bit. I mean, you can't fully discredit what they've done this year, because they have been outright, still over the course of the entire year, the best team. But when it comes to form and when it comes to premiership favourites and everything now within that conversation, Sydney's dropped out of that conversation for me. I think there are teams ahead. There is definitely teams playing with more momentum and a better vigor about them, more excitement about their game. But don't discredit Sydney for this loss, because I feel this is a loss that they'll probably need to get them kicked up the arse and start producing, and this could turn Sydney back into the juggernaut we saw for the first half of the year. Individual stats for this game, again, with such a comprehensive performance, especially from Port Adelaide, and don't get it mixed, 112 points the way of Port Adelaide, this game is going to come down to all Port Adelaide players getting the votes here. I couldn't justify giving any Sydney players any votes, and if there was going to be any Sydney players in the mix, probably only maybe one of them, and that would have been Errol Goulden, but even then his stats weren't that impressive. He had 25 at 64%, 9 contested. He did have 568 metres gained, which was huge, but he had 2 clearances, he only took 4 marks, and he only had 5 tackles, no score involvements at all. He was just, in a game where he performed the best for Sydney, was still squandered by a large majority of Port Adelaide players. It was just all Port Adelaide from start to finish. This was just as comprehensive a win as you'll ever see them have, and I've said that once and I'll say it again. When it came to the 3 I voted for, maybe a couple stiff. Ollie Wines, again, another huge game from him. 31 disposals at 80% disposal efficiency, 18 contested, 279 metres gained, 8 clearances, 5 marks, 1 goal, 9 score involvements, and 3 tackles. Probably stiff to miss the conversation there. Zach Butters had 30 disposals at 70%, 7 contested, 4 clearances, 5 marks, 10 score involvements, and 8 tackles. Didn't get a vote either. The 3 I landed on, though, I thought, given their moments and given their opportunities, I think stood incredibly tall. The 1 vote I'm giving to the captain, Connor Rozee. 27 disposals at 66% disposal efficiency, 6 contested, 355 metres gained, 5 clearances, 8 marks, 1 goal, 2, 9 score involvements, and 5 tackles. For the 2 vote, I'm giving it to Willem Drew. Very underrated, this player. 32 disposals at 75% disposal efficiency, 16 contested, 523 metres gained, 8 clearances, 6 marks, 11 score involvements, and 6 tackles. And best on ground for me, I'm giving it to Jason Horne-Francis. 27 disposals at 63%, 15 contested for 455 metres gained, 6 clearances, 4 marks, 1 goal, 12 score involvements on the game. The shock here is he didn't lay a tackle, but he made up for that in having a hand in almost half of the scores that Port Adelaide generated. He's had a year that has been very telling of the talent level that he does possess. It's just unfortunate that that talent is kind of a bit few and far between when it's been a discussion point, given the fact that, he's a hothead and finds himself in precarious positions being spoken about. It's a tough one, but he has had a huge year for Port Adelaide this year. He's only been in the system for a handful of years now, so once he hits his peak and we see the best out of him, I feel it could be a conversation point that he'll be amongst the best in the competition, but he definitely was the standout in this game. Shifting attention to the first of 3 games on Sunday, this went down at Manuka Oval. GWS taking on Hawthorn in a game that, just like Collingwood versus Carlton, came down to a 3rd quarter deficit, changing to a 2-point victory come the end of the game. It was a game that I thought Hawthorn had it signed, sealed, delivered. They were almost 5 goals clear, just shy of 5 goals clear at 3-quarter time, and both teams just played a different brand in that final quarter. It was a quarter that Hawthorn, I don't know whether it was complacency, but they only went on to kick 2 goals, 1 for the term. GWS came up and turned it up with 7 goals, 1, and makes you really question, again, is it Hawthorn's inability to defend late in games? Is it the tsunami being too hard for opposition teams to stop when it gets rolling? The conversation point here obviously being, given up until 3-quarter time they only kicked 3 goals, 3-quarter time they only kicked 5 goals. Is that tsunami starting to roll in a little bit too late, and come finals, is it going to be a situation they find themselves in against other teams where not hitting that tsunami early is going to cost them And when I say tsunami, I'm talking about their role from defensive 50 to forward 50, because when they move that ball, they're one of the best teams in the competition to look at while doing so. Very Richmond-like, 2017, 2019, 2020, and to no surprise, obviously Adam Kingsley transitioning over to GWS, he's kind of taken that mold and exemplified it at GWS, because the players he has at his disposal there just fit that game style so incredibly well. No injuries to report out of this game. Again, substitutions only superficial. Joe Fonte replaced Max Grueski in the third, and Hawthorn had Luke Bruce replacing Colshier Deer in the third as well. Nothing to really identify out of this game, except for the fact that Hawthorn were caught sleeping, and for lack of better terms, they fucked around and found out. They found out in a pretty emphatic way, because GWS just popped up out of nowhere late and really put a stamp on the competition in the way of making people remember that they're still here and they're still relevant. And the momentum they've started to really start rolling with is momentum that I feel we need to be worried about, because I feel GWS can give I firmly believe this win solidifies that GWS can give the Premiership a shake this year. They don't have to finish in the top 4 to do so. I don't know whether it puts Hawthorn at risk of missing finals now, because if they fade like this against other teams, it's going to be incredibly costly, especially given the fact that they're playing Carlton this coming weekend. Two teams that have played different brands when it comes to late football. And when I say late football, I'm talking third quarter, fourth quarter efforts. Hawthorn have had a little bit of fades over recent weeks. Carlton have been more so the opposite and fast finishing. So it's going to be an interesting matchup. Individually for this game, again, there were a number of players you could throw a blanket over for both teams, given it was a close finish, and the influence from those players, you know, individually was so great. I mean, Carl Amon, I think, has had a very underrated year for Hawthorn. 30 disposals at 90%, 9 marks, 5 score involvements, 4 tackles. He misses the votes this week. Tom Green has 25 at 72%, 15 contested, 6 clearances, 2 marks, 1 goal, 4 score involvements, 2 tackles. Not good enough for the conversation. Brent Daniels has 23 disposals, only runs at 56%, but he has 3 clearances, 4 marks, 9 score involvements, and 5 tackles. Peatling, I think he had low numbers in the way of only 17, but he laid 10 tackles. Again, he's a tackling machine. I would love to pick him up for Richmond. I really would. His pressure around the contest is something else. However, the one vote for me, I landed on Jesse Hogan, the man who is now leading the Coleman. 17 disposals at 70% disposal efficiency, 11 contested, 210 metres gained, 11 marks, 5 goals, 2, 7 score involvements, and 1 tackle. Now, 7 score involvements with the 7 of his own. He might have only had the 1 tackle, but given the fact that he has kicked 5 goals in a game where they have come back late and stolen a win, I feel he's got to stand up for a vote for impact, especially given the role he played in that final term. The 2 vote, I landed on Jai Newcomb, who I think has been Hawthorn's best this year. 30 disposals at 66% disposal efficiency, 19 contested, 460 metres gained, 11 clearances, 3 marks, 2 score involvements, and 6 tackles. But it was Lockie Whitfield. Career best season. This man has been huge. 37 disposals at 89% disposal efficiency. Only had the 3 contested, but he had 702 metres gained, 10 defensive marks, 10 score involvements, and 2 tackles. Huge. He has the capability, if GWS can go all the way to the grand final, I'd almost be tempted to slap money on him to win the Norm Smith, because he has had somewhat of a year. He has been a player who, again, should fall under that conversation that Geelong's Tom Stewart has fallen under when it comes to being a must-tag player to take his influence out of the game. I feel that is very much a conversation Lockie Whitfield. My English today, holy shit. Lockie Whitfield has fallen under that category, I feel. That's all I'm trying to say. I'm trying to say people should be paying more mind to how dangerous a weapon Whitfield has become within this season and who will be a threat, I feel, for many seasons moving forward while he continues to run in this kind of form. The conversation then shifts to the MCG, where Essendon hosted Fremantle in yet again a game that should have been dead in the water at three-quarter time and was a tale of a completely different tape. And it was within the last minute of the game that Essendon came back and stole this from the grasp of Fremantle. And again, it leaves a conversation point of whether it was Fremantle's inability to hold on to a lead and defend that lead, or whether Essendon are really that good. And I feel this, as much as people are going to say I'm being too harsh on Essendon, this is definitely Fremantle fumbling, because Fremantle, as I've said all year, at their best, top 4 team, 100%. This wasn't at their best. It was up until three-quarter time, and then they just let it fucking fumble out of their hands, and I don't understand how they did that. And then Essendon was just able to find space where space shouldn't have been. They were able to get opportunity to look inside 50 where those opportunities shouldn't have been. It was just a pure lack of defensiveless effort. It leaves my head scratching. It really does. And this now starts putting doubt in people's heads of whether Fremantle can seriously be a contender come the finals. Even though I'm still saying that they're my dark horse selection, I still feel we should be paying mind to them. No injuries out of this game. Tactical subs, 100%. Alwyn Davey Jr. replacing Nick Bryan in the 4th. James Aish replacing Neil Erasmus in the 3rd. Again, I don't know. It was such a weird game. Such a weird game. I haven't paid much mind to the MRO this week, but there was a tackle from Tom Emmett laid onto Jaden Laverde that may have been considered dangerous. I don't know whether he has been stung for that or not this week. As I said, haven't paid much mind to the MRO because there hasn't been really that much to look forward to at the MRO this week. This game, however, did put Caleb Sarong into discussion as being a player who over the last 71 matches has had a streak of over 20 plus disposals, overtaking the previous best by any AFL player set by Jack McRae, who had 20 plus disposals over a 70 game period. So Caleb Sarong is one to really keep an eye on. A lot of people were bullish about his drafting to the club. A lot of people said that when Adam Cerra was traded out and they kept Sarong instead, that they had made the wrong move. I personally feel Sarong is 10 times the player that Adam Cerra is, and he has definitely stood up and shown that this season. Given the scoreline was so incredibly close, it is no surprise when we break the stats down of the individual performances in this game that there's a handful, and I mean a solid handful, that could have been in the conversation. And when you can only pick 3 from possibly 10 players that could have been in the mix for this game, there's going to be definite discussion point to talk about the ones that are going to miss, especially when I rattle off names like Darcy Parish, Andrew Brayshaw, Caleb Sarong, Luke Ryan, Jordan Clark, Mason Redmond, Nick Martin, Sam Durham. All miss and all had huge games. I just feel, again, in the context of impact and moments, that the 3 players I landed on were huge, given the moments they had and given the roles they played at pivotal moments in the game. The 1 vote I landed on Jai Caldwell. 32 disposals at 71% disposal efficiency, 11 contested, 506 metres gained, 4 clearances, 5 marks, 8 score involvements, and 6 tackles. The 2 vote I gave to Zach Merritt. 29 disposals at 79% disposal efficiency, only 3 contested, but he had 491 metres gained. Again, not the clearance machine we're used to seeing him be. He only had 2 clearances, but one of those clearances ended up winning Essendon the game. So in the context of quantity versus quality, I think he falls into that bracket. 6 marks, 6 score involvements, and 7 tackles. And best on ground, I believe, was Hayden Young. I thought he had some sort of a game for Fremantle on the weekend. 27 disposals at 70%, 13 contested, 438 metres gained, 7 clearances, 1 mark, 2 goals won, 8 score involvements, and 7 tackles laid. Again, Andrew Brayshaw, Caleb Sarong, Jordan Clark, Darcy Parish, all probably could have been in the conversation for the 1 vote, 2 vote. I just feel Merritt and Caldwell at given moments just stood up when needed and I feel were more influential in the moment. Again, it's only my opinion here. It's not a definitive opinion, so feel free to argue it with me down below. The final game of the round saw Brisbane taking on St Kilda at Marvel Stadium. And the conversation point for me for St Kilda this year has been their inability to kick winning scores. And after I made that point a few weeks ago, they've come out and they kicked back-to-back 100-plus points and they won 2 games. And I turned around and I said after last week, they could kick 100 points and win this week, but they might only kick 40 points next week and lose. And that's pretty much what they did. They only registered 39 points. Up until half-time, they only kicked 1 goal, and they only kicked 4 goals for the rest of the game. On the flip side, Brisbane kicked more goals in a half of football than St Kilda did for an entire game. It was just an absolute demoralisation of St Kilda by a team that historically does not travel well. And Brisbane have been making Marvel their bitch recently. I really love the fact that they're starting to find their groove. I personally feel at this point in time right now, Brisbane should be the premiership favourite. And if they can finish either first or second on the ladder, they secure themselves at least 2 Gabba finals. They get the first week at the Gabba, they should win. They move on to a prelim at the Gabba, they should win. They walk into the grand final. And that's a scary prospect. It really is. No injuries to report. Again, tactical subs. There were some late changes though. Eric Hipwood was a late change for Brisbane with a groin complaint, replaced by Bruce Revel, and St Kilda had Ryan Burns replaced with an illness by Angus McLennan. Substitutions were Paddy Dow replacing Bonner at half-time, and Bruce Revel replaced Charlie Cameron at three-quarter time. Again, nothing to worry about. It's just given the fact that at three-quarter time, Brisbane were 10 goals clear, you put Charlie Cameron on wool and you make sure that you're keeping your best fit and firing for the rest of the season. 23,000 at Marvel Stadium. Not bad. I mean, not the best either, but I mean, it's an interstate team. St Kilda haven't been performing all that well, so you can't really expect many to be rocking up on a late Sunday afternoon to watch this game. It was just so one-sided, and when games are so one-sided like this, they become incredibly hard to watch, and you really switch off. As a neutral, it was a game where I was happy for Brisbane, don't get me wrong, because one of my best mates is a Brisbane supporter, so seeing them up and about is great. But I mean, when a team wins by 85 points and it becomes just such a slog to watch one team underperform so incredibly badly like St Kilda did, it just takes the sting out of the game, I feel. And when you have a look at the performances of some of the players, I mean, St Kilda had some players dig deep despite the smacking. Jack Sinclair has 30 disposals at 30%, 6 score involvements, 8 tackles. Mateus Philippou had a big game, I thought, 24 disposals, 79%, 5 clearances, 5 marks, 5 score involvements, 3 tackles. Josh Battle, 24 disposals and 9 marks with the 5 score involvements. Nasiah Wanganeen Malira, 23 disposals, 7 marks, 3 score involvements. But outside of that, it's just all Brisbane. It is all Brisbane, and it was just a matter of working out which of the Brisbane players I felt performed the best, really. And there's going to be a couple that miss. Dane Zorko, probably the most glaring omission out of a season where he hasn't been suspended, he hasn't had injury. A lot of people would have expected either to happen by this point in time, if I'm being completely honest. 26 disposals at 69%, 6 contested, 428 metres gained, 1 clearance, 8 marks, 4 score involvements and 2 tackles. Outside of that, I think the 3 I've landed on are pretty much the 3 for the game. The 1 vote goes to Cam Rayner. 22 disposals at 50%, 7 contested, 441 metres gained, 2 clearances, 5 marks, 3 goals, 8 score involvements and 2 tackles. There is a lot of conversation that a lot of Melbourne teams are interested in picking up Cam Rayner in this coming trade period. I don't know whether there's talk about him wanting to come home or whether he's just on the trade table or as a free agent maybe he's being floated. But to hear that Richmond are on top of the list of players, or of teams rather, that are chasing him as a necessary player, required player, desired player, whatever kind of player you want to put him down as, excites me, because Cam Rayner is a player I would very much love at the club. He is a midfielder, he is a forward, it's that hybrid blend of those two roles that I think Richmond are truly lacking. I mean, we've got Shea Bolton, but the consistency is far way too in between. We've just lost Dustin Martin to injury. Could Rayner come in and play that role where he plays that forward role and chip hits in the middle? I would love to see him at Richmond, but with so many other teams vying for him, it's going to be a question of whether he sticks thin with Brisbane or whether another suitor just becomes too hard to deny. And with Richmond performing as poorly as we have this year, I don't know whether we're a destination club anymore. But with the retirement of Dustin Martin, with the trades that are going to be coming, Richmond's going to have a fair bit of salary cap to throw around. So maybe we will have enough to maybe lure him down. Watch this space. The 2 votes I'm giving to Lachie Neale. 33 disposals at 81% disposal efficiency, 13 contested, 279 metres gained, 13 clearances, 6 marks, 7 score involvements and 2 tackles. But best on ground for me was Mr. Hugh McCluggage. 28 disposals, 75% disposal efficiency, 14 contested for 369 metres gained, 9 clearances, 3 marks, 1 goal, 9 score involvements, and 6 tackles. He's really popped up out of nowhere, Hugh McCluggage. He, again, is one of those players that his consistency is a bit to be desired, but this year, he's been turning it up. There hasn't been much in the way of fallout to discuss from this particular round. I think attention does need to be drawn to the fact that goal umpires are still way too dependent on the ARC technology and the score review system. Being at the Richmond North Melbourne game, there were 2 or 3 instances where it was clearly and evidently either a behind or a mark or whatever was going to be called. It was obvious. The ball was either a mile over the goal line, untouched, it was marked in the field of play, and the fact that they kept calling for the score review had the crowd in an absolute uproar. And I was making jokes for the rest of the game every time a goal was kicked, asking for a score review because it was a behind or out in the full, and had people laughing in our general bay that we were sitting in. But it wasn't the only game that had this going on, and it's not the only round this year that we have had too heavy a reliance on a system that I still feel isn't complete and is still rather broken. I mean, at this day and age, with the technology we have, we should be able to have fucking 4K resolution on these ARC cameras, and cameras should be placed in angles where we can get definitive answers instead of it's inconclusive as to whether or not it's gone over the line or whatever the case may be. I know they're flirting the idea of, we're going to put fucking tracking devices in the ball so we can register whether it's a point or a goal, and it will come up on your screen with all of this fucking conjecture around, displaying on the screen if it's a goal, if it's a behind, blah, blah, blah. I don't even know if that's going to work. They don't even have this ARC review system working, and we're talking about putting technology inside of footy. I don't fucking understand, but that's probably the only discussion point to really have out of this week, apart from the fact that Andrew Dillon, the AFL CEO, is still heavily suggesting that there has been a lot of positive feedback about a wildcard round for the finals, which would see the 9th and 10th spot play 7th and 8th for a place in the finals. Again, I'm on board for that on the aspect of it gives opportunity to more teams. It gives us an extra round of football. It keeps more people in the hunt, which means more fans would be more inclined to support their team deeper, because it gives them an extra, you're going to be going into finals with the prospect of, if we just miss the top 8, we can still maybe appear in that finals bracket. But I can understand where the negative conjecture is coming from for that as well. It breaks tradition. Top 8 in an 18-team competition, some people feel is too much. So I don't know. Let me know in the comments down below how you feel about a potential wildcard round being introduced to the competition. That being said, after 21 rounds of football, this is how our ladder shapes up with only 3 rounds to play. In first place, after being 3 games clear, we have Sydney, who are on 56 points. Only 2 points behind them is Brisbane on 54. We then have Port Adelaide and GWS in 3rd and 4th, rounding out our top 4. But with Geelong in 5th, all 3 teams currently sit on 52 points, which is only a win behind first place. It's going to be a very interesting finish over the next 3 rounds. In 6th place, we have Fremantle on 50 points, so only a win out of the top 4. We then have the Western Bulldogs and Carlton in 7th and 8th to round out our top 8, both on 48 points, and again, both a win out of that top 4 bracket. In 9th place, we have Essendon on 46 points, only a win out of the top 8. In 10th, we have Hawthorn. In 11th, we have Collingwood, both on 44 points respectively, both currently 1 win out of the top 8. After that, I think the teams that are going to be mentioned are out of the finals discussion, with Melbourne being 12th on 40 points and Gold Coast being in 13th on 36 points. I feel it's going to be too hard a run for them to make the finals this year, which means since winning their grand final, Melbourne have gone back-to-back years with back-to-back knockouts, and they're not going to make the finals at all this year. So, I don't know. Is Christian Petrarca more valuable to that club than what they're letting on? Yet to be determined. St Kilda sit in 14th spot on 32 points, and then the bottom 4 sees Adelaide with 30 points, West Coast with 16, North Melbourne with 12, and Richmond all on their lonesome on the bottom of the ladder with 8 points. I still feel Richmond can win 2 of their 3 games to finish the season, but I would still love to get the number 1 pick, and I would love to see trades happen so we can start rebuilding. And I feel there should be more players on the chopping block, and we're freeing up salary cap space, and maybe we target some players as trades. I don't know. Huge watch for Richmond, and I'm looking forward to covering that, so stay tuned. With the round officially recapped, there is only one thing for us to do, and that is to turn our attention to the Hip and Shoulder MVP Award Top 10 and see how that is situated after 21 rounds of football. And we've seen some monumental shifts go down, especially given the fact that I've had to shift some of these votes as we've gone along through this video. So a couple of players that might have had a vote or two, upper hand on some other players have kind of dropped back down a little bit. And let me preface this again by saying Patrick Cripps should probably be 4 or 5 votes higher than what he is right now. So again, I continue to apologise to the Blue Baggers for having, rose-tinted glasses for the first half of the year. I don't know. But in 10th place on equal 16 votes, we have Matt Rowell from the Gold Coast, Jordan Dawson from Adelaide, Noah Anderson from the Gold Coast, Harry Sheasel from North Melbourne, Zach Butters from Port Adelaide, and Sam Walsh from Carlton. In 9th place on 18 votes, we have Tom Green from GWS. In 8th place, with 19 votes, we have Jack Steele from St Kilda. In 7th place, on 20 votes respectively, we have Lockie Whitfield from GWS and Errol Goulden from Sydney. And in 6th place, on 24 votes, we have Marcus Bontempelli from the Bulldogs. This is where personal opinion might come into the sway of things. And again, I apologise if it upsets people the way I've been voting. But in 5th place, we have Adam Treloar on 25 votes. I just feel he has had such an underrated season and he's going to steal way too many votes off Bontempelli this year. In 4th place, probably should even be second or even leading at this point in time, we have Patrick Cripps from Carlton on 26 votes. In 3rd place, this was originally an individual 3rd place and then 2 in 4th, but the shift in votes have Nick Dacos from Collingwood, Caleb Sarong from Fremantle, and Lockie Neal from Brisbane, all tied for 3rd on 29 votes apiece. In 2nd place, for the first time this year, dropping out of that top place seed, we have Isaac Heaney from Sydney on 31 votes, with Zach Merritt from Essendon taking the lead with 32 votes. I feel he's had a very underrated year as well in the way of other captains being spoken about more when it comes to all-Australian calculations. People are now heavily talking about Patrick Cripps and Marcus Bontempelli. I feel personally I would probably be giving the captaincy to Patrick Cripps at this point in time with Zach Merritt as the vice, and I still feel Zach Merritt is a Brownlow Smoky. That is just my personal opinion, but that is how the MVP award for the Hip and Shoulder shapes up with its top 10 after 21 rounds. Do hope you guys enjoyed today's video. Thank you for sticking thin with all my gibberish and losing touch with the English language at times and dragging things on. I do really love putting this podcast together, and as I said, I've already got systems in place to make sure this podcast moving forward into 2025 is going to be bigger and better, including different people, different discussion points, maybe different segments. Let's make this bigger and better. And how can you do that? By two ways. You can hit that like button down below, which tells YouTube I'm doing something right around here, and hitting that subscribe button as well to make sure that the community we are building continues to grow and thrive into something so much more. If you are passionate about AFL, if you love your AFL team, if you love watching the great game, get on board. Let's talk about it. But that's it from me, guys. I'm out of here, and as always, I will catch you guys next time.